Last time we got this far, and I promised I was going to do this one for you again. Or not again, but so I can show you the first go around. Okay, so the colors we used was transparent yellow, correct? And
Red.
okay, and the red, the Quinacrodone red. So we're just recapping, and I like to put those two. I think they did that last time too. I usually find, even if I can't remember, I tend to do things the same way. Here's the Quinacrodone red, and I like to put them next to each other, and that way they can kind of, you know, give me different kinds of oranges and reds. So I'm gonna put a little water on my lantern. Now, when I looked it up online, if I type in Google Chinese lanterns, they actually bring up, they bring up actual Chinese lanterns, the lamps.
Right.
Or they bring up a beautiful little flower that I have seen. It hangs like this, and it's red, and it has like the petals out like that, almost like a lantern.
Bleeding heart.
Not a bleeding heart, no. But when I then if I type in Japanese lantern, this plant comes up. Yes.
So it's Japanese.
So anyway, and that's what I had called it first. But then, you know, in one of the other classes, no, Eva, it's not Japanese lantern, it's Chinese lantern. So, oh, okay. But you know, being me, I had to look it up.
With red on that one.
I'm doing red and yellow together, so it's an orange.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So I
see.
want this one a little bit darker. Why do I want it a little bit darker, do you think? Behind, correct. It's behind, and so I wanted to push out that one, so that's why I'm giving it a little bit more color right from the get-go here. And I'm also painting first here on the shadow side, right away from the light, because I made my little arrow up here, so, you know, yours truly doesn't get all confused. And give each lantern their own light source. That could happen. And, you know, I actually, when I was an artist in residence up at Mendocino Art Center, one of the gals that had been an artist in residence before me, and she was still there right when I started, I think it was. And she was a pastel artist, and she painted outside. So she was like plein air with pastel. I don't know. You know, they always have like a big box with a gazillion pastel sticks. So I think that must be very cumbersome, but I find plein air cumbersome no matter what. But anyway, so she had this thing that, you know, of course, you know, when you're painting outside, the light is always changing on you. The light is always changing because, you know, the sun moves, it doesn't stand still. And so she painted. And, you know, her paintings took like, you know, number of hours. She actually painted, that was her style. I thought it was so interesting. So she had decided she was just going to paint as the light moved. So, you know, so she wouldn't have the same light source as the day went on. That was her style. It was very interesting. It was some beautiful paintings too. But I just never run across anybody who did that. So you can just see, I just wanted to share that because you can see, you know, there's no rules. You can make up your own rules. So I put a little bit of that in there, and, you know, let it mix. I take advantage of the fact that it's still wet, so the colors will just mingle on their own. I don't have to work so hard. And then I'm going to do what I did last time too, I do believe. I'm going to take my my dagger brush, and I squeezed out all the water with a little tissue and made sure that I have that nice edge. And then while it's still damp, I can go in and lift out some highlights on those little ribs that are here. Can lift back a little bit. You can do that with a thirsty brush, we call it, when we have squeezed out all the water. Here, and even a little bit here. There. So that way, you know, I'm already kind of a little bit ahead of the game. So that was that. And then I can't really paint on this side of that lantern because this one's still wet. So I'll not do that. But I can paint on this one and get the, show you again how I did that thing with putting the next layer of color on. And start bringing out some more shape. So you can do it different ways. If you want to, you can put a little bit of water inside, kind of like down the middle. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, and then I probably should take a little bit of a smaller brush. And then I can go in with a little mixture. It can be a little bit darker because it's on the shadow side. And then I can go in with pigment on and try and bring out, not here but here, the rib. And here I can just see a little bit up there. I have decided, oops, I better be careful here, right? Whoops, I didn't think about that. So I am gonna make sure that I don't get it wet all the way into the, and then I'm just gonna loose this edge on this side. So there's a little bit of the rib there that I can see. And now I'm gonna put a little tiny bit more pigment on just the tip of my brush. I just want to see a little bit of it there. And with a damp brush, clean and damp, I can go in like this and can even go down here a little bit. And then, while it's still damp and my brush is not too wet, I can go in and put a little bit of darkness, not super dark, a little bit. On that other side, I want to have a little bit more here. I wipe my brush many times on the towel because here it's beginning to dry. So if I go in with a lot of moisture on, I am going to make a bleed back. And I don't want that. So there's that. And then I'm gonna go in on the other side with kind of an orangey color. And I'm just dipping back and forth in my red and my yellow until I kind of feel good about the temperature and the intensity of the color. And if in doubt, err on the light side. So here I'm going in and doing it wet on dry. And now I'm going to leave that little bit of space, and I'm not going to go the whole way because then it's going to dry on me and I won't have time to lose the edge on this side, because here I don't want a hard edge. Just where I'm trying to, show that there's that rib going. And I want to put in a little bit more darkness, and then I can continue down here a little bit darker. It's always good. I always, as you can see, I like to vary my color all the time because it makes it more interesting. Drag a little bit of that red, and we can drag it all the way over here, and that way we're already kind of also beginning to show the other rib. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. And I'm just gonna push the envelope a little bit. Hopefully I'll get away with it. I wanna just put in a little bit like that. It's just so much fun. I love this. I'm just playing. That's how I feel. So now I can go in up here and tell the story of that rib that you can see a little bit of, and that's then disappearing. You see that? And make sure it's nice and skinny. Can you see that? I just kind of finished that. I didn't finish, but you know, for now. And that's how I'm going to work on all of them. So I'm gonna let you go down and get some painting done, and then once we have the ribs all kind of the first go around, then I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna go in and really make it, you know, have more, build in some of the dark so we can really push down where it goes down and make them really more concave and things like that. But this is like step 2 on these. So better to err on the lighter side. We can always build more color and make it darker. So there it is. And I take my rigger brush, which is this long skinny brush that has a nice tip to it. And then I have it just, you know, dampened. And then I roll it on my towel, and then I roll it in that dark pigment and get some of all that pigment off. And I make sure, I try to make sure that I have a really nice tip, and I might even go in and take a little bit of that extra pigment on and make sure that it's nice and pointy. And then with a very light touch, I hold it more upright. So, and I barely touch the paper. And then I can go in, and can you see, I make some of these little waves beginning to break apart. Can you see that? Oh, it's fun. And if you are a little nervous about this, go in and practice on a separate piece of paper. And I'm barely touching, and I'm just trying to think about the direction of how these little things would go. And can you see how that just, you know, I'm trying to make it look decaying.
Right.
And if you'd rather leave yours so that they're like in the beginning of their bloom and they're not decaying, you can totally do that.
It makes it more interesting with the
But that's exactly, I always say these kinds of flowers, they're a little bit like, you know, when you know, a lot of people, they like to paint old barns. And you hardly ever see an artist paint like a brand spanking new barn. Like you would want it to be, right? If you owned it, that's how you would want it. You wouldn't want the ones they paint that are falling apart. But the decrepit falling apart barns, they're much more picturesque or painterly. And it's a little bit, that's what that's what I liked about this one. And then while we have this little rigger brush on, we could also go in and put a little bit of detail on these little ribs here on the shadow side. Can you see that? If you put a little bit in here and there, that would be fun. At least I think it would be fun. Some of you, not so much. And you could also go in then and loosen the edge here a little bit, just so that way it looks more like a shadow. Can you see that? How you can build a lot of different textures on these. So that's basically how I would finish them off once I had done enough work on them. And if you want to do them a little bit darker, I'll show you one more trick. And then I'm going to show you the stems. And then I'm going to let you paint on it for a little bit. And then we're going to start our new project. How's that? Does that make everybody happy?
Yes.
Good. That's what I like to do. I strive for happy students.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you started painting, or did you ever like test it on a piece of paper, like I see a lot of people doing, before you put it on your artwork? Test
Sometimes
your paint.
my paints, sometimes I do, but now I painted so long, I paint with a limited palette. I know my colors very well.
So you.
So, but as a beginner, it's a very good idea. Or sometimes when I'm trying out new colors, definitely, I usually do myself a little, I'll show you at some point. Okay. I'll make myself a little swatch where I like to wet everything and then run them in and see how they play with each other. That's what I always like to say. So anyway, so I put a little bit of a darker color on here. And so if I wanted to give this one a more of a concave look, can you see how I put it down the middle? Okay, not too much chatting now, Eva. A damp brush, clean brush, and now I'm gonna just loose the edge on either side of this thing, and it'll look more concave. because I darkened it a little bit. So I darkened it, the yellow and the red together for orange, and then I put a little bit of burnt sienna in to kind of dirty it up. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, good. So that's another option. And there is like, you know, again, it's all comes down to dark pushes down, light brings forward. And cool actually also pushes down. And so the next thing I should show you is, let me show you another of these stems. Of course, mine, you can barely see them because I lost my lines, but I know where they are. And even if I didn't, it's my painting, and I can change the stems if I need to. That's how that works. So there's that. Okay, so the way I do it is, I'm gonna paint this one. Yeah, great, thanks. I'm gonna paint this one here, this section. So eeny, meeny, miny, mo, you can start with whatever you like. So I can start with a little bit of kind of an orangey color. And I put it in, I put a little bit of water in first, as you saw. And now let me put some of the blue into here. And let's put a little bit of the orangey red into here. And see how I'm just letting them just mix and mingle on the paper. And let's put a little bit more blue on this side. And if it goes too blue and I go into a panic, which I'm not, but what would I do? I will just calmly say to myself, okay, Eva, what is the opposite to blue? What's the complementary color? It's orange. So I would know that if I put a little bit of orange, which I do right now, into the blue, it's gonna take the blue down and neutralize it. Can you see that?
Yes.
I have so much fun doing that. This is an exercise in, and I can use my black that I already mixed there. It's an exercise in color, theory, kind of, sort of. And then here, and I just mix those colors together on, and go down here. I'm gonna have it go behind. And I have it, on purpose have it darker on this side, away from the light. And here, where it's going behind, in order to be able to show you that it's going behind, it would be a good idea if I made it quite a bit darker than that thing that's in front, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm gonna do. And rinse out my brush a little bit. I don't want it to look like a stripe, so I'm just gonna make sure that gets blended in here. And before it dries on me, I'm going to use my little credit card trick. So I take my credit card, and if you need to borrow one or get one from me, I'm happy to share. And so I'm just scraping in with this pointy part of my credit card, and I get a little bit of those statements. And can you see now it looks like it's catching a little bit of light on the front, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I think it does. And I can go back in, it's still a little bit damp. I can go back in while it's still a little bit damp with my little rigger brush here if I needed to doctor something up and darken it a little bit there. And then, very important, so it disappears there and it comes out on the other side. So, let me put a little bit of water in. I had already done it, but now I dry it in the meantime. So I'm gonna put a little bit of water in the rest of that stem. And then I might as well just go with the dark up here. You want to make sure that it's the same color up here and down here. Don't have it two different colors, then it looks like they don't belong together. That it's not the same stem, right? So I put a little bit of that in there. Put a little bit of red in. I can put a little bit of blue in. Doesn't matter, because I'm just going to let all the colors mix and mingle. Put a little bit of yellow in.
So you're using a reddish orange and a blue to get the stem color, reddish orange and blue.
I use all the colors that's in my painting in the stems.
Right.
I have a little bit of the blue, of the yellow, of the red, and of the burnt sienna.
That's right, burnt sienna.
Yeah, so I have all those in there. And now, just make sure that it's all the same. And a little bit darker here on the back. Don't want it so green down there. If it's too green, what do we put in? Red. Red. There we go. Go like that. Here we are. And just get rid of that one. And then I'm gonna get my little pointy credit card out and scrape in. And now it's very wet, so you can't really see, but now I'm getting actually some darker ridges because now my painting was still wet where I scraped. And so what happens is there's enough water for the pigment to fall into those. I kind of scraped out little grooves, like a little, ditch in the paper. And so the pigment falls in, bloop, and it can't get out again. So that makes it darker. Here, it was almost dry, so then what happens, and I have to wait here to get a few little highlights in. Then what happens is, when I scrape the pigment away, and it doesn't have enough water, can't run back. And then it just stays where it is, and so I get highlights. So you can get both with a credit card, depending on when you scrape. And if you scrape when it's dry, guess what happens? Nothing.
Or it tears the paper.
Or it tears the paper. But see here, now I could pull out a little highlight there. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Voila. And that's a lot of fun. See, us watercolorists, we're so darn lucky. Oil painters, I have an oil painter, and Monica Johnson, she's local. Anyway, and she also teaches classes. And so I was teaching some classes at her gallery when she had a gallery. And she was, painting. And she was like, man, you watercolors, you have all these tricks. We don't have any tricks.
Really?
Yeah. So anyway, so that's that. So here I'm back in my studio, finishing up this painting that I demoed in class. And I already demoed all the techniques, so I just wanted to finish it up for you so that you can see. And you're welcome to slow it down if you want to see some of the details as I'm painting here. I'm using the colors that I've used in the entire painting. So French ultramarine blue. I use some of the burnt sienna to tone down the blue and make neutrals. And I dab in some of the quinacrodone red and the transparent yellow as needed. And I keep thinking about where my light source is and getting dark and light on the stems to give them form and shape. And I'm just going to let the music take over, and I hope you have fun painting this. Okay, so here you can see again how I put those details on the lanterns using my dark color that I mixed from French Ultramarine Blue and Burnt Sienna, or you can also just mix French Ultramarine Blue with your yellow and your red and create a really, really dark color. And I'm putting a little bit of that color on with my rigger brush on the shadow side of the ribs to make them stick out a little bit more. And I use that same color for the little holes in the lanterns, and I use it very, very concentrated, so not too much water, and just a little bit of that color, and then I leave a little tiny bit of the light in between these little dots. So here I am zooming in so you can get a better look at how I create the finished touch to these areas where the lanterns are decaying by putting in a little bit of the local color here, orange, and leaving a little tiny bit of an edge around that area where I put on all those little dots. And then I blend out and lose the edge on the outside, and that makes it look as if that little area of the decay, the holes in the decaying area are surrounded by ribs that are sticking out. They're a little bit lighter, gives it more dimension and makes it look more real. So you can see here I'm repeating that same method on one of the other decaying areas. And it just gives it more dimension and a little bit more interest. And of course, if you're not into doing so many details on the little lanterns, you can certainly leave them much more impressionistic. But I just wanted to show you how to do this. It's a lot. I think it's a lot of fun, and for some of you, maybe it's a little too tedious. You can also just leave the lanterns much more impressionistic, and don't put on all those little extra details. But here I have shown you how to do it, and I'm going to speed up the video again so this doesn't take forever, and you will have the option to slow it down. So you can see here I'm just continuing building up the values and deepening colors to give more depth to the lanterns. Here I'm darkening with burnt sienna and has a little bit of French ultramarine blue in it. to make those areas where the stems are attached to the lanterns, make them a little darker, and then I go in and darken with a similar color on some of the shadow sides of the ribs, and just look at it, see where I feel it needs a little more definition, and I go in and put a little bit more intense color on, and I always make sure that I loosen the edges on the outside so I don't get a stripy look. And this is how I finished off this painting, and I hope you had a lot of fun with it, and I look forward to seeing you in another YouTube video. And if you haven't already, I ask you to hit the subscribe button down below on the right, so you can subscribe to my channel. It's free, and all it does is that it helps me get up in the rankings, and be easier for you to find my YouTube videos this way. So here you can see the finished version of this particular painting of the Chinese lanterns. Happy painting!